All right, folks, let's do a quick rundown of the insanity this week. 1 minute per story. So, where are we? Um, CNN facing call to fire its chief media correspondent, Brian Stelter, for not exposing the ongoing romantic relationship between Jeff Zucker and senior executive Allison Gollust. Well, apparently, people at CNN are unhappy because this guy had a long running affair with this woman who everybody knew about, but because the chief media correspondent didn't report it, he should get fired, but not them. No one else should get fired for not reporting the exact same thing, just the one guy who obviously knew about it, but probably was just as smart as they were and didn't actually report that his boss was having an affair in public, basically in front of everybody else. So this kind of just goes to show how you have people in this world who want other people to do things and take the heat for it or the risk, but not themselves. Okay. Number one story, I wanted to start off with that. Okay. Now the rest of these are in no real order, but we're just going to go through them more or less as they came up on my computer today. Massachusetts professor pleaded not guilty to running over a police officer boyfriend, leaving him for dead in a snowbank after a night of drinking in Boston suburbs during last weekend's nor'easter. So these two geniuses decided they were going to go out, drive around in Boston in the middle of a snowstorm and get drunk, then drive back to her place. Then he got out of the car. She hit him with the car. Then she acted like she had no idea that she hit him, but she did the next morning. Actually, remember, she did hit him. But then somehow, for some reason, she woke up this morning or the next morning and decided to call around and ask her friends where he was. She was worried that he didn't come home. And sometime later that day, she remembered that she had actually hit the guy. So again, okay, this guy's a cop. He's been a cop for a long time. They've been dating for a long time. They go out bar hopping, get smashed, and she drives back to her place, and he just passes out in the front seat. Is this a normal thing? Who knows? What's next? Trump alleging that, again, being Trump, that whenever there's a major shakeup in a major industry, or especially media industry, it's because there's a loss of ratings, not because there's some violation of this or violation of that. And he's probably right to some extent that one of the reasons why at the very end Zucker was forced out was because CNN had a major ratings drop. There's probably some truth to that, but the fact of the matter is that firings are not always driven by ratings. In this case, it is a very plausible thing that the fact that Chris Cuomo was trying to sue them to get the rest of his money actually forced the parent company AT&T to actually get rid of Zucker out of consistency. And probably they will have some heat for not getting rid of him earlier, and someone else is going to take the blame for that. So yes, but all in all, sure, maybe, possibly, sure, there's some truth to that. Again, story about the affair being such a secret. So many people knew about it. So many people had, information on what was going on. But as the reality of these things work, you have ethics standards on one hand, and then you have income standards on the other. And very few people will actually give up a salary or give up a large paycheck, a solid job behind the scenes at a major media station over an ethics conflict between, involving senior management. Number one, it burns bridges, and number two, it burns your reputation. So even if you spent a whole long life working in this industry, building up all these contacts, they can all go south because you suddenly get a reputation as a snitch against senior management. This plays out over and over and over and over again, endlessly. It will never end. And that's why so much of these other stories are so important. Okay? So what happens when we have this big case in New York City where two cops were shot on duty, as opposed to sitting in their cars or at their girlfriend's place or helping to escort drug dealers around the city or all the other stuff that police officers do when they're not actually doing their duty as police officers. The other police officers in New York decided they were going to make a federal case out of this and shut down an entire street in the middle of Manhattan for blocks. As many people have commented on it, why do we have all these cops at this funeral and no cops out on the street? I guess we don't need to have them on the street today because there's a funeral. So what exactly are they doing when they're not at funerals. And this is raising another question about what government employees do with their time. When they're supposed to be working, are they actually working? On the other hand, now this comes to something that I've dealt with personally, because I have a friend who is a correctional officer, female friend, good friend of mine, very nice lady. And I have talked with her about this many times. What's it like for her to be wandering around these facilities with these men who are locked up, they're medium security or whatever, and not have to, get assaulted or whatever. And here, apparently, this has been an issue at Rikers, and what Rikers has done is basically pushed it under the rug, swept it under the rug. One of the problems with Rikers is that it shut down solitary confinement because some of the prisoners who had gone through it were complaining that it was an inhumane treatment. So now we have this problem back again. What do you do with problem criminals who really don't care about the rules? Lesson B, what do you do about problem criminals who don't care about not walking around New York City or whatever other city with illegal firearms? And let me tell you, this has got two parts to it. Number one, there are the career criminals that walk around carrying illegal firearms and buying illegal firearms. And second, there are people who are not qualified to buy and carry firearms who get in touch with these people and buy and carry firearms, depending on where they are in the country. In certain parts of the country, this is a common thing, okay? Don't ever believe that gun control laws are routinely obeyed by people who claim to be law-abiding citizens. They are regularly abused and ignored by law-abiding citizens who want firearms and don't really care that it's illegal for them to have it. They had the same problem in New York. It's a problem that's very common in the South. Bringing in the mayor is not going to really change that. Same thing again with these police officers who are making a big hoorah out of this funeral for these two officers. Yes, it's sad that these two police officers were killed. Yes, it's bad that police officers all over the country are being killed. Yes, it's sad that there's a lot of gun violence around the country. But the police have also contributed to this also, because when they decided that they were no longer going to actually patrol the streets or actually do anything about crime on the streets, after some of them were prosecuted for things like killing suspects that were in custody, abusing suspects that were in custody, raping suspects under custody, things like that. And there have been plenty of cases where there have been police violence against the civilian public that has turned the police against the criminal justice system. Another case came up this week in San Francisco, where the police decided they didn't want to cooperate with the DAs anymore because the district attorneys were actually suing some of the cops for abuse of the citizens. So now we get to this whole problem with Whoopi Goldberg and this whole issue of what exactly was the Holocaust. So, well, interesting thing that I think that came out of all of this is the sheer fact that so many people got upset by what she said. That what she said was so egregiously wrong that you have people like this clown Podhurst actually saying she should not have a Jewish name. That it's bad enough that certain words and phrases in our English language are associated with Judaism and therefore, quote unquote, have a negative connotation. Now it's bad for this woman to change her name to a name which is traditionally known as a Jewish name, and she doesn't deserve to have it. So do you really think that the answer to all this is to tell her she can't be Jewish even in name? Okay, fine. Where does it stop in the end when you talk about PC, when you have conservatives complaining about PC and conservatives complaining about wokeness, and then you turn around and you have these same conservatives promoting PC, okay? It starts to look like a lot of what happens is just happening because it's an opportunity for them to attack the opposition. And in this case, we really have to wonder, what do we do when the conservative media attacks the president and attacks the Democrats over the same issues that Trump had to deal with, same issues that Obama and Bush and everybody else has to deal with. Why is it suddenly that we have to attack the president just because he's a Democrat? So now they're saying that the Democrats are attacking them just for political reasons. Well, ultimately, doesn't it all come down to political reasons? If it's an issue of something that's worth attacking other people or attacking your political opposition, then it is a political reason. So on that note, we have this young gentleman, 19-year-old gentleman, who has decided it's a wise idea to put up a website tracking Elon Musk's plane. Now, let's talk about racism here for a minute, definitely, because you tell me what would happen if this kid was Arabic or African or certainly Latino, and he put up a website saying, hey, look, you want to know where the richest guy on the planet is? Here, look on my website, I'll tell you. This is classic stalking. This is classic internet, interstate stalking. This kid actually barters with Musk to take down the site, refuses to do it because he doesn't get enough money. And then you have these tech companies in Silicon Valley who are saying, hey, you know what, this is great, let's hire this guy. They shouldn't be coming near this kid with a 100-foot pole, assuming that you look at the situation ethically. The problem is they're not looking at it ethically, they're just looking at the money they could possibly make off this information, which is, to a large extent, public information. But at the same time, I really don't know if I would want to be a private citizen, especially wealthy private citizen, having my plane ID'd by the federal government and having the federal government put that information on the internet so someone can track it. I'm looking at a lot of holes in that whole concept. But since the kid is white, it's got to be a good idea, right? Anyway, so what's the next one? Back more to Whoopi. I'm going to say right offhand that I personally feel that what she said was 90% correct. Now, the real issue with saying that the Holocaust was not about racism is to understand what racism is first, okay? Now, the Nazis certainly declared the Jewish race as a separate race from the Aryan race, and they certainly declared that the final solution to the Jewish problem was the extermination of the Jews. There's no question about that. But the question is, are Jews a separate race than whites? Do they not belong in the same race as whites? Because if they do, then it's not racist. If they don't, then it is. But whose word are you going to take on it? Are you going to take the Nazis' word? Whose word are you going to? Whose opinion are you going to believe to say that Jews are a separate race than Germans or British or the French or any other group, Russians, whatever? And this is, to me, where it comes down, I think, a very hard point, is that I'm not seeing so much the issue of her ignoring racism. I don't see that at all. What I see is, I see a large section of the the community that supports Jews, let's just say, okay, as embracing it as a racist issue and not just a Jewish issue, okay? There's a lot that has happened throughout history with regards to the Jews because they are Jews, okay? Not because they are a separate race than everybody else. And I think it's important not to lose that distinction. I think it's a very critical issue to not ignore the fact that they are, in a sense, wrapping themselves around the flag of racism. The Holocaust was an exceptionally violent period in this world's history, and it's important to remember that and to realize that, yes, it is a very significant thing, but it is also important not to lose the fact that it was not about race, it was about hate. It was about hate between the Germans and the Jews. And not just the Germans, there's plenty of hate for Jews in most of the world at the time, okay? It's just that the Germans took it to another level, and on top of that, it wasn't just the Germans that have done this to the Jews. And that's important to realize, that at some point, it does require you to believe that the Jews are a separate race. And that is racism. That is where the racism is, okay? If you're going to take that belief, then yes, it's racism. But if you are taking that belief just to minimize the issues with the Jews, that's not racism. That's escapism. That's people avoiding the reality of their lives. It's not just about race. It is far from just about race. I can't think of too many other cases of people where they had to worry about the entire race, quote unquote, of people being exterminated. It certainly happened. And it happens now, even now. We have tribes in Africa and that are being exterminated by other tribes and so forth and so on. But let's not minimize or hide the issue that it has a lot to do with the fact that they're Jewish, not just that they're a different race than the Germans. And that's the last thing I'm going to say. I fully support what she has said, and I completely understand her position. And if I was her in her position, I would already quit. You're just supporting the other view that you should be suspended by agreeing to be suspended and then talking about coming back. Just make a decision and leave and be done with it.